We're Jackie and Brian, and this is As the Ice Cream Churns. Together, we founded Ample Hills Creamery, a little Brooklyn ice cream shop that grew into something bigger than we could have ever imagined. This is our story of loss and resilience, and the honest, sometimes beautiful, often complicated art of beginning again and again. This season, we catch you up on what really happened with the Social and Ample Hills and take you with us on the next leg of our journey. We're opening something completely new, Ramblin' Chick, a bold, unexpected concept for us and for the rest of the world. Our guide is our close friend Debbie Rosen. She's a therapist, not our therapist, but she has been helping us make sense of where we've been and where we're headed. Let's get started. Hey, Debs.
Debbie.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. It's been years since we met, and a lot has happened, and it really seems like a roller coaster between, Ample Hills and the Social, having it and not having it. And I'm just wondering, how are you feeling at this time?
It has been a roller coaster. I can't really put into words the feelings of highs and lows that we've continued to experience over the years. Brian and I spend a lot of time talking about it. We wake up in the middle of the night sometimes dreaming about it, having nightmares, trying to dive deeply into what happened, what we are responsible for, what we could have done differently. So it's hard, and it continues to be hard. Some days are easier than other days, but it's still with us, I think.
I just want to say, I think it's just such an important aspect of what it means to take risks entrepreneurially and to go for it, and all the things that have, so much that people are inspired by. But there's another side to it. And because often things don't work out the way you want them to. And what's admirable is that you've kept doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Thank you. I think for me, I'll just speak for me personally. I think part of what makes it so difficult to talk about is that it is deeply embarrassing. And I think for me, it's embarrassing because the listeners were here on this podcast, an episode, I don't know how many. In all of these episodes, we've brought the listeners along on this journey with us of exploration of the roller coaster of Ample Hills 1.0 and the glorious heights that we met, and then losing it all, and the mistakes that we made that nobody else made, but that we made and I made, that led to losing it, and the learnings that we had from that. And so we brought those listeners along on that journey. And I think that there would naturally then be an expectation on the part of listeners. Certainly, there was an expectation on the part of Jackie and I that this time things would be different, because that's the way it works, right? You learn something, you learn from your mistakes, and then you don't repeat them the second time around, and then you have a happy ending. That's certainly the expectation that I had going into it, and I think that it's why it feels for me so embarrassing to have to be back here again. Like, I don't want to be back here again talking about this. I mean, I feel like I'm dragging myself kicking and screaming to this discussion because it's just hard, but it is valuable for the very reason you just said, Debbie, that is a part of entrepreneurship. And I think that at the end of the day, the path that we're on, that everybody's on, isn't always as linear as we'd like it to be. We want a Hollywood story of a beginning, a middle, and an end that's clear and straightforward. But sometimes there are more setbacks along the way, and sometimes we take 2 steps back before we take another step forward. And that's what this is. And if we're going to move ahead again with another project, which we have, which we'll talk about some other time in another episode down the road, we have to continue to be willing to look at the mistakes we made and learn. And I can verify before we get started, we didn't make the same mistakes this time around. We really did learn. We just made some new mistakes, which we'll get to.
You brought up a good point about it not being linear, because even though there's these ups and these downs, there's both. And the successes and failures, you can learn from both. And the idea that when something doesn't work, you can, focus a lot more on the failures, but it's not all that. What I'm wondering at this time is if you could take us back to when we last met and kind of walk us through what happened.
Yeah. So the last time we met was January of 2022, and we had the social for 6 months. We opened in July of 2021. We were struggling because it was the winter time, but we were also struggling because COVID had not yet receded, and we had been hit with a couple of different variants. We were banking on the fact that we were going to have a bunch of parties because we had this big, beautiful space, and we were excited to really come back together after COVID in the roaring 20s and have a bunch of parties with kids. And that wasn't the case at all. People were masked and, nervous. And so we were not doing great at that moment in time.
How many parties do we have that January?
Like one.
One
And
party.
they were all masked. It was so sad. It was like, it's
But
cute.
there was Delta, there's Omicron. There was a reason why people were nervous, but it was tough because an ice cream shop loses money in the wintertime, and that was how we were going to try to get through. We struggled. We limped through January, February, March. After we had spoken in the last podcast, we made it through to the warmer weather of April and May and June, and things picked up. But they didn't pick up the way that we needed them to make up for how bad that previous winter had been. Because of course, there's always another winter coming. Winter is coming. There's always another one, and so we could see in July and August of 2022 that we weren't going to make it through the following winter of 2022 into 2023, that those losses would be too much to continue to pay the bills and that we'd have to shut down. And so we went back to our investors and we laid that out to them, and they didn't pause. They didn't hesitate. They supported us, and they put more money into the business to allow us to get through that next winter. And I think it's important to note, because of all of the water under the bridge and stuff that happened that we'll get to, that when you start a relationship with investors, there's a lot of trust. Maybe trust isn't the right word, belief. I mean, the investors absolutely are believing in you. And every investor we've ever met always says, oh, we're not investing in the idea, we're investing in people. And they believed in us, and we believed in them. And that's something that sort of mutual belief starts at the beginning, and unfortunately can slowly fall apart and turn into something very different.
Right. I mean, I guess ultimately it's business in the end.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Unfortunately, no, it's true. It is business, and there's a lot of money at stake.
At this time, Ample Hills is open. I think everybody's struggling business-wise with the variants at that time. What was happening with Ample Hills?
Yeah, I mean, Ample Hills was open, and we were excited from the beginning to take them on. When we opened the social, we were excited to compete with ourselves. We started to hear rumblings that winter of 2022, September, October, November. We still knew people on the inside that Ample Hills was struggling and that they might close their doors. And so by middle of December, maybe a week before Christmas, the news came out that Ample Hills had shut down and they had furloughed all their workers. And so our investors immediately reached out to them, to the people that had owned Ample Hills at the time, to see if they were interested in selling it, and that we would buy it back, that our investors would buy it back. They weren't interested at the time. They said absolutely not. They had closed down for a little while around Christmas when it was slow, and they were going to raise more money to help them out. And so that's all they were interested in. So we kind of put it in the back of our minds. It was kind of a neat little thought exercise, and exciting to entertain. But we had the social to run.
Well, meanwhile, the social was like gangbusters.
Yeah.
It had taken off, right?
Even though it was winter, it
yeah.
was like the COVID had finally started to recede.
That's right. Well, COVID had receded, and we had booked like a ton of birthday parties, right? So all the anxiety around the first winter there had completely receded, because everybody wanted to gather, and they wanted their birthday parties at the social. So it was, I think we had like 15 or 18 birthday parties.
That January, 1 year later, for 15 birthday parties. 1 year later. We hadn't done anything different. Like, there was no marketing, there was no social media, there was nothing that we did that changed that narrative. It was really, the quality of what we were doing, of course, rose to the top, but it was really COVID receding and people feeling like they could finally pour out of their houses. So we were doing better in January and February and March of 2023 than we had done in like warmer months of like September and October of the previous year, even though it was winter, because it was just so good.
What's interesting is Ample Hills wasn't doing well at the same time that you were rising. So do you have any comments about that?
We don't take any pleasure in that. Oh yeah, I guess that would not be gracious of us. No, I mean, it was obviously really sad to see Ample Hills go away, because we weren't sure that it would ever come back. And while there was certain joy in watching them stumble and fail, we had built that brand and created that brand, and so it's still hard to watch it not be there. And to be clear, they didn't reopen. January and February and March, we were doing gangbusters into April. Ample Hills never reopened. And so sometime around April or so, the owners of Ample Hills reached back out, or we reached back out to them. I don't really remember what happened. And they were interested then at that point in trying to sell it. And so it was, I guess it was May.
It was May when we got it back.
Yeah. And so in May of 2023, our investors reached a deal to buy back the Ample Hills IP and about 4 of the shops for a fraction of what, it had been bought out of the original bankruptcy.
I mean, this was a huge comeback story. There was a lot of press about it. What about you guys? What was going through your minds at the time?
I mean, it was amazing. It was overwhelming. The outpouring of support and love, it was incredible, and it really did feel like that comeback story. And I wish that the story ended then, and that was just it, and we could stop talking. Goodbye, Debbie. Okay, that's the end of this conversation. I really do, because it felt so powerful and overwhelming.
Yes, it was just an incredibly emotional experience to come back to where it all started. Our Vanderbilt shop, which was our very, very first location that we opened in 2011, which we still live, only a couple blocks away from, is we were buying that shop back. So I remember going into that shop before we actually reopened it, and nobody kind of knew, and I just sat there and just remembered all of the great times that we had in that shop. Like, our daughter's, 5th birthday was there, and that was the first birthday party we had, or one of the first birthday parties we had. And just remembering the kids when they were little, and remembering the first time we had live music in the Vanderbilt shop. And it was just all of those things, remembering neighbors, and just feeling like an immense feeling of gratitude. Like, wow, like we got this back. Like, this is amazing. And people were just so excited. Do you remember when we went to Prospect Park event, like in the park, people were actually cheering because
Oh,
there was a an article that came out in the New York Times, like, they're back. It was
yeah,
such a
we were
feel good
walking and yeah,
story.
some people like just happened to see us and recognize, and there was this sort of cheer went up. And but I will say at the same time, there was this sense of anxiety and a little bit of more than a little bit of trepidation. And it was sitting there under the surface, even from the beginning, because it just didn't, something, we were sort of pushing it down, this feeling of unease around it, because it didn't feel really like it was ours this time. And it wasn't something that we could feel like we could talk about in public or talk about to the press. But it was that was difficult.
Is that because of the control or lack of control that the two of you had in Ample Hills?
Yeah, good point, Debbie. That's right. I hadn't discussed that yet. So part of the deal in getting Ample Hills back, our investors placed on the deal was that they wanted to install a new CEO to run this new company, which would be 4 Ample Hills locations and the social as well under one umbrella. And so I think it's important to remember that when we started the social, we had all 4 walls that we controlled. Everything inside the 4 walls of the shop we were given control of. And there was no CEO because it was just a single store. Our investors felt, well, we're going from 1 shop to 5 shops overnight. And literally there were 2 or 3 weeks to open them. And we can get to that, but it was a very quick thing. And they wanted to have one of their own sort of be in charge of the financial guardrails and be the CEO. And we agreed to that. Obviously, we agreed to that because we wouldn't have gotten Ample Hills back otherwise. And I think that what is frustrating in hindsight is that we were the real mistake what we made was that we were really blinded by this incredible desire to have that comeback story, to have that feel good story, to get Ample Hills back, that we relinquished control. But we also sort of believed at the time, or we convinced ourselves that we believed at the time, that we had more control than we did because of our role in our role just in people's hearts and minds, that we were the ones who had founded Ample Hills. And so we would be steering Ample Hills, even though somebody else was named CEO. I think that speaking for myself, that's sort of how I felt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, there was a feeling I had in my gut, that I just denied. I was trying to push through that feeling and sit in the Vanderbilt shop and feel the good vibes coming through that we had originally created. But somewhere along the way, I guess just time and having lost it once and created this other thing, and I don't know. It wasn't the same, obviously. It couldn't get back that feeling of joy and excitement. That was hard.
I mean, you talked about initially that the investors believed in you and that you really were able to have a lot of control of the social. And it
Mhm.
sounds like at this point there's a breakdown. Why did this happen? I just don't know how much you can talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It is. I mean, it's true. I think before we go on, it is important to note as a disclaimer that we have a non-disparagement agreement in place
In perpetuity.
in perpetuity. And that, I don't think anything we're going to say here is disparaging. I mean, I do still feel, an appreciation for the fact that they invested us in the beginning. Yes, we obviously disagreed with them about many things, and we can still talk about those disagreements, but it may explain why there's some umming and ahhing and dancing around certain things. I do think that, it's important to note that I don't know if you ask them, that they would say, oh, the trust had broken down at the moment of taking Ample Hills back. I think from their point of view, they wanted to bring in a CEO that had a financial experience because, if any listener listened to our podcast, the financial part of running multiple shops was what we struggled with. And so that part of me was happy to relinquish that bit of watching the financial guardrails to this other CEO. The problem is a CEO doesn't just cover the financial guardrails of a business. They also set the tone for the staff. They set the mood. They set everything about the direction and the visioning of the company. And there wasn't any time, there was zero time, there was less than zero time between getting Ample Hills back and restarting Ample Hills and having people walk into all those shops again and buy ice cream to discuss anything relating to vision, story, messaging, all of those things that Jackie and I feel so strongly about. It was May, the weather was warm, and we needed to open to sell ice cream. So
I mean, it made sense, right? It was just a fire drill. It was a complete fire drill.
And so at that time, what would you have liked to have happened differently if possible?
I think the thing that I most wanted at that moment in time was more time. I mean,
Mhm.
we were in a place in May once we got the place back. We didn't have a place to make the ice cream. So just taking us back, the factory at Ample Hills was gone. That had shut down. That wasn't part of what the purchase of the new assets was. The purchase of the new Ample Hills, getting it back, was just buying back the intellectual property, the name, and 4 of the stores, but not the factory, because of course the factory, if you listen to the podcast, you know that the weight of the factory was what sunk us the first time. So the new investors that we had no interest, and we didn't have interest in taking the factory back because we knew that was a challenge. So, but we also knew that there was no way at the social, in the kitchen that we had at the social, to make enough ice cream for the other 4 shops of Ample Hills. And there's just technically and feasibly no way to do that. So we had to go find another place to make the ice cream. And we had this push, from the investors and from the new CEO to reopen as fast as possible. And we wanted to, to be clear, we wanted to open too. We didn't want to see the summer disappear. We just felt it was more important to take time to think about the repositioning of Ample Hills. Because you have to remember here at this point, Ample Hills had been through a lot as a brand. It had lost its founders the first time around in the sort of second iteration of Ample Hills. And then it went out of business, and it had been out of business and hadn't sold a scoop of ice cream in 6 months because it had closed down in December of 2022. And this was now, June of 2023. So nobody had bought a scoop of ice cream. The shops were, dusty and dirty and sort of felt old and still had Christmas decorations up. We were thinking about rebranding or repositioning, how we could retell the story. And so I think that Jack and I had a different idea of sort of how to reintroduce it. But we didn't really get a chance to discuss that because literally every second of our time was focused on how and where can we make this ice cream. And we just so happened to have friends that had a location that had a factory space, and they were moving from one location to another. And we were able to just shockingly step into their space, move some ice cream making equipment over there and make ice cream. But it was truly this thing that sort of fell out of the sky. It still had lots of little pieces that had to be worked out, but had we not done that and we had to go build out a new production space, we never would have opened until late in the fall.
Yeah.
So did you want the ice cream to be the same as the ice cream from the social recipes, or were you going to keep it different?
No, I think that what we wanted to do all along, and what we ended up doing through much of that summer that we were back, was to do a combination. We sort of would introduce to the social some of Ample Hills' most popular flavors, and we would introduce to Ample Hills shops some of the social's most popular flavors. I mean, one of the things that, of course, was the ooey gooey butter cake, which was one of, if not, it was the most popular flavor. And so we had made at the social a flavor called ooier and gooier. And so we would put both of those flavors in the shops, and we would ask people to decide, do you like ooey gooey butter cake or ooey or gooey? So there was some fun things that we did there to sort of combine the two brands and to look at what the best things were. Yeah, so it was just the speed at which we were trying to operate, and make the ice cream and try to get those shops reopened meant that we weren't able to sort of have those important conversations about branding and narrative and social media and messaging.
For me, it was about coming back to this brand that we had created and it having changed slightly, but bringing this other brand that we we created together and finding like, the synergy, I guess, of both of them and trying to create a new thing. How the people within the company, because we took back some older employees and we had employees from the social, and some of our employees from the social were employees from Ample Hills. It was about gathering everybody together and creating a culture and a vibe that felt really good. And it was really hard to do that because we were rushing to get everything open and kind of like pushing everybody to work harder and harder to get the ice cream made, to get it sold. And I guess I just wanted, like you said, a little bit more time, not a lot, just a little, and to be able to, you know, step back and really have a, conversation about it. And maybe it was us being too precious about it at the time. When I think back about it, I don't know. I think there was so many emotional ties to it that, it probably was too precious at certain times. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be honest. It's like, okay, you got to make money. You got to sell ice cream in the summer, and you got to get this done, and then we can figure out the rest later. And that would have been fine too had we been able to do that, but we weren't.
You've mentioned that you had reservations, red flags appeared, gut instincts, and I'm just wondering why you ignored them this second time around.
Yeah, I mean, it was out of a place of necessity, really. You can say, oh, you feel this way, but we still have to live in Brooklyn and pay our rent. We have 2 kids that are entrenched in school. We can't just up and move and start completely new lives. We have to figure out how to survive, ultimately. It wasn't because we didn't know that there was something amiss here.
But we had nothing from the first
Yeah.
bankruptcy. We had nothing but debt.
Right.
And so we were not in a position of strength, and we were definitely vulnerable. And, that's not an excuse, but it is an explanation for why you might, push down reservations you have, because there is ultimately money and food on the table that
Yeah.
you can reach out and grab.
No, it's really hard. And people say, oh, we're so, you guys just keep persevering. We're like, well, we don't really have a choice but to persevere. We have to figure out how to get back up and how to do, how to make a living ultimately. As much as we didn't want to compromise on some of these issues, we found ourselves compromising just in order to keep the lights on.
Yeah, and it was an exciting opportunity that was presented to you.
Right. Right. It's complicated, right? It's not just one or the other. It was exciting. At the same time, it was necessary. There's a lot of nuance here that's hard to really explain. And
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it's nice and easy to say, well, if we'd have just kept the social, it was going gangbusters. We could have just grown the social, maybe opened other socials, let Ample Hills stay dead the way
Right.
it was at the time, and maybe things would have been different. But I don't know that ultimately they would, because the problems that we had, and I think it is worth noting, I think we do owe it to our listeners again this time around to explain like what happened and how it came that we left again the second time, because it wasn't voluntary. Ultimately, we ended up boxing ourselves into a corner because from day one, we really didn't agree with the CEO. And I don't think that it probably warrants a lot of conversation about the nature of those disagreements, because those are things that, I'm not sure we're comfortable going into for reasons we've talked about. But just from a day-to-day point of view, we disagreed with things small and things large, little decisions, staffing decisions, bigger decisions, vision decisions, where we're going to go, what we're going to sell, the kinds of products, all those kind of things. And I think Jackie and I felt like we were protecting the brand and protecting the spirit of the brand. And if I'm gracious now, I imagine what they felt, on their side and the CEO side felt like they were protecting the financial stability of the brand and protecting the financial guardrails of the brand. And so those things are not mutually exclusive, but sometimes they can certainly be in tension. And ultimately, over the course of that summer, it didn't take long, June, July, August, September, we kept fighting. And at the end of the day, our investors, I think we had the opinion, Jackie and I had the opinion and the belief that at the end of the day, our investors would believe and side with the founders over the CEO. And at the end of the day, they didn't. And they made the decision then that they were going to stick with the CEO and that the relationship was unsalvageable and that we needed to leave. So they asked us to go. And by November.
November.
Yeah. So it was just a very quick 5 months of arguing. Could we have fought less? Yes. But I don't know that we knew how to fight less, because this was the thing that we had given birth to, Ample Hills. And so we did what we thought was the right thing to do every day. It was in the short term, certainly not the right thing for our paychecks and our livelihood and taking care of the kids that we talked about, because at the end of the day, they asked us to go.
It kind of, it goes back to what you were talking about in the beginning of this question, which was the vulnerability, where you were. You accepted a situation, I'm guessing, or what I'm hearing from you, that didn't give you much power to actually argue or have disagreements and still be okay, be able to work it out. There was such a, discrepancy in power but at the same time, you were used to being the ones in control, and that's a hard position to be in.
Yeah. No, it's a hard position to be in. I think it's interesting because since then we've had to take other jobs and also not be in control, and it's been another kind of a learning for us to see what it's like to be on the other side of founding, owning, and becoming and being a leader. Now we're watching other people as leaders, as founders, or as owners, and it's such a different place to be in.
I think that I think it's so different when we go in and consult or work for other founders or other leaders since then, because it's not ours to start with. And so I find it to be, I don't know about you, but I find it to be so much easier to have those disagreements and those arguments, knowing that this is not ultimately my vision. It's not my idea. It's not my baby. I'm there to sort of support and help with whatever the issue is. It's a very different experience than the one that we had allowed ourselves to get into. At Ample Hills, this had been our baby. And so now we were basically just saying, well, it's not really our baby, but we're still trying to raise it. And that's real. That was untenable. But I think it's been exciting and rewarding to be a consultant and sort of work with other brands in a way to sort of help them with that
Can you
journey.
can you tell me more about what you both have been doing?
Yeah. So since then, we've both been doing a lot of consulting and branding work, helping other brands, businesses figure out who they are, what the story is that they're telling, how to evolve into their next phase. It's been really rewarding because after years of building our own companies, we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, how culture, communication, storytelling can make or break a brand. And, it's been interesting to step into these worlds of other people having stewarded our own for so long, to see things from the outside, to help guide without owning it, like Brian said, ourselves. So there's definitely an opportunity to see it from a totally different perspective. Yeah.
I will say that part of doing it, though, and I've also been working and consulting and doing ice cream consulting and different things. But part of it is that bug to create your own thing. It doesn't go away for Jackie and I. And I think that it's heightened by seeing and helping other people on their own journeys. It's definitely it's always been there, and it's now been 2 years since we lost Ample Hills and the Social again, right? And in those 2 years, we've done a lot of this other work for other people and other brands. And there's still that sort of needling thing underneath as you're working for the other brands that hey, like maybe there's another thing for us. So we have something that we're working on and that we're excited to sort of share and move into the future about. But maybe we'll save that for another episode. What do you think?
Well, there's already been some press about Ramblin' Chick,
Yes.
No.
Smash Burger, chicken burgers. I think
Cracklin', hold up, Debson. It's Cracklin' Chicken Smash Burgers.
Okay, thank you.
Haven't used the word cracklin'.
Yet. I've heard they're delicious. I can't wait to try them. But I think for the next episode, the first question I have is how do you pivot from ice cream to crackling smash chicken
Burgers.
This is a good question. Chicken to ice cream. Yeah. No. And there will be some ice cream at Ramblin' Chick.
There will be
I
ice
do
cream.
promise. But yeah, we can talk about that next time.
Okay, sounds
All right.
great. So good to
Thank you.
see you.
So good
Alright.
to see you, Debson.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.